Operation WinBack is an action-adventure third-person shooter / espionage game that was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2000 and in 2001 in other regions. The game also got a release on the Nintendo 64 a year prior in North America and in Japan. And the game takes a lot of inspiration based off of popular games with the likes of even Metal Gear Solid, even Siphon Filter and many other types of action-adventure games that would have been seen on earlier consoles. So the story based around a group of Marines or military personnel that are tasked with trying to uncover the whereabouts and take out a group of terrorists that are holding a special operations base to ransom with the intention of launching nuclear weapons. So it's up to you to try and stop them from happening. But as you approach the surroundings of where you're supposed to drop off, your helicopter is shot down. So it is left to you to work your way through many of the environments situated within the base to try and stop the incoming threat, while trying to also defeat many other opposing soldiers along the way. And you also have to try and find other members of your team that went missing after the helicopter was shot down. So the game, as you play through it, depending on various choices that you make in the game, can determine either one of the two games' endings. And when the game was released, it did receive average to above average reviews, and the main criticism was with regards to the controls, as although this is a very early PlayStation 2 game, the control systems at that time wouldn't have been as well put together or well understood compared to later games that you would see in more modern consoles, as it tries to incorporate gunplay and action, but also tries to use stealth elements where you crouch and you can hide behind items and also duck behind items in order to get out of the way of incoming gunfire, so that you can peek around corners at different points to take out enemies either quietly or during battles, so that you can kind of cover yourself to stop you getting hit. So there's an element of strategy behind the various combat mechanics in the game, which is quite unique, and there wasn't too many games around it at that time that was doing that. But it was just the controls is what would cause a bit of issue, because the controls are awkward and they can be somewhat quite clunky. Now, in saying that, the game does offer up a decent story. It does have some nice graphics, considering this is a very early PS2 game, and it does have some really cool elements, even with the gun mechanics and gameplay. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it does have some nice elements in the game, aside from the clunky controls. But it has a lot of very satisfying elements with it, with regards to the story, and especially the way you engage with dispatching enemies. Once you can take them out, it definitely helps you, and you can understand the game a lot better, and you can definitely feel like you improve as you go through the game. It's one of those games that when you sit down and play it, and the more you get into it and the more you understand it, the more you want to play it. That's the funny thing, it has those addictive qualities to it, which is pretty cool. So once you manage to finish the game and defeat all of the bosses in each of the levels, you will be presented with various cheat codes that you can gain access to through the story mode, that will give you access to additional elements, armor, and even infinite ammo for a multitude of your weapons that you would unlock throughout play. There was also a sequel with Operation WinBack 2 that was also released on the PlayStation 2, but it didn't get a release. There was also a sequel with Operation WinBack 2 that was released a few years later, and the Nintendo 64 version of the game would also be re-released on the Nintendo Switch on the online store back in 2001. While it's not the best action-adventure game on the PlayStation 2, and considering that it is a very early game, it does have some very unique elements and some really nice features that really stand out, and you can definitely see inspiration from other iconic action espionage games such as Metal Gear Solid. So if you're looking for a really good alternative to the likes of Metal Gear or even Siphon Filter, Operation WinBack would be a good alternative. Mind you, if you can master the clunky controls, there is a half decent game here, and you will find that you'll get into it. For myself personally, my first experience with this game, I remember going back during the early days of the PS2. A mate of mine had gotten the PlayStation 2 not long after it had come out, and one of the first games that he had on it was Operation WinBack, and I remember staying over in his house one weekend and we sat for a whole day playing this. Now, I'll be honest, I hadn't a clue what I was doing, because I was still getting used to figuring out the controls, because the control systems, especially during those early days on the PS2, especially when you're used to playing PS1 games, although there were games on the PS1 that had similar style of controls, but you could get used to them. But the fact fact is there was more advancements with various control elements on the PS2. It definitely took a while for me to understand it in a logical way, because you just would get confused. But then it kind of brought me back to when I originally played the PlayStation all over again back in 1996, because that jump from playing 2D games to 3D games was just mind-blowing. But at the same time, it was completely just way beyond what I expected. Trying to play the original, even Resident Evil, trying to understand how to aim the gun, how to shoot, how to run. There were so many different things going on, and back then trying to figure out how everything worked was just crazy, because you were so used to playing games like Sonic the Hedgehog where literally all you had to do is just move left or right and jump, and that was it. That's literally all you had to do. So trying to play games with a lot more of these dynamics, and then even moving forward with the PS2 at the time, was very, very confusing. Even today, going back and playing a lot of these games, it can still be confusing to figure it out. Now, because I've played a lot of these games over the years, it will still take a little while, but you can understand the concepts behind it because of having the experience of playing so many games. You know yourself that you can pick up certain dynamics, and you will pick up the control systems after a while, and you can kind of get used to it. But back then, it was a no-go. Your brain just couldn't justify or compute what was going on. So a lot of these games, from my own experience, a lot of them would just kind of be left on the shelf for a while until you could really kind of have the mindset to go back to them. And this was kind of one of those games for me back then. But having to go back and play it now, it is an enjoyable game. And the funny thing is, I appreciate it and respect it a lot more now than I did back then, and I can understand it a lot better now. That's the crazy thing with a lot of these older games. You may not understand them at first, but more often than not, you'll find that you have to go back to them after a while, and then suddenly things just make sense and you can understand them. I know the controls in this game aren't great and they are fiddly, but when you do put time into it, it is a good solid game, and it's a good alternative to Metal Gear and even Siphon Filter, even though it does play differently with regards to the controls. But it is a decent game in its own right, and I would recommend, if you do like these type of espionage and action adventure style games, add this one to your list and see what you think for yourself. It is a decent game, and it's a very good early entry to the PlayStation 2. And if you're interested in seeing what games looked and played like back in the early days of the console, you won't go wrong with this game. So I would love to know your thoughts of Operation WinBack for the PlayStation 2, if you have played this game yourself back in the day, and if so, what do you think of this game overall, and are you a fan of these type of action games? So I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of this game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell to be updated of future videos. And if you would like to see more content around more of these type of action adventure games also seen on the PS2, you can check out the playlist on the screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.